Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the moment of truth. Yes, it has happened. Again. The site of the latest carnage is a school in Madison, Wisconsin. On Monday at 10:57 a.m., police received a 911 call from a second grader about a shooting at Abundant Life Christian School, which is a K-12 academy. When they arrived, they found a teacher and a teenage student who were pronounced dead at the scene. 6 other students and a teacher were injured and taken to area hospitals. They eventually found the suspect who had a gunshot wound. She died in transit to a hospital. Authorities eventually identified the shooter as 15-year-old Natalie Rupnow, who went by the name Samantha. Is there a racial motivation behind this latest slaughter? Of course there is. There always is. But the white media ignores it because they always do. Natalie/Samantha wrote what the white media calls a manifesto. All she does is she rants largely incoherently about things she hates. It reads like it came from the mind of basically a very silly, very immature teenager. See, if this was a non-white person they were talking about, they would just say that the shooter left a note. They wouldn't be calling it a manifesto. A manifesto implies that this is some sort of learned and erudite person giving some sort of treatise about the world, something sophisticated and learned. That's the last thing it is. She starts off her diatribe saying that she hates seeing people so sensitive. Sounds like Ben Shapiro and every right-wing nut you've ever seen the last 40 years, now don't it? And for someone who hates sensitive people so much, she spends page after page after page whining about every little petty thing she can think of. By the way, if you ever read an excerpt from Hitler's autobiography Mein Kampf, you'll notice the exact same type of gripes. The times may change, but these people don't. The people who have the least to complain about are the main ones complaining the most. And instead of society telling them to shut up, it instead gives these people platforms and legitimizes them, which makes them think they have a point even though they don't. She also says that the human scum is color. Well, she's warming to her subject, I see. And then on the second page, she decides that she's going to talk about what she hates the most. First, she says she hates whores and scum. Those are the things she hates the most. But then in the very next sentence, she says niggers. Though worse, once you sleep with one, you are one. I don't care who you think you are or what you've done good for this world of yours. It will never matter because you will always have no thought and no brain to continue with. Now, doesn't that sound like every crackpot racialist pseudo-scientific gibberish about black people and alleged lower IQs that you've ever heard? The same rambling, same avalanche of verbal vomit. There's no coherent thought being expressed here at all, and yet they claim it's black people who have no brain. This is why the online anti-black rhetoric that these websites freely allow to be posted is not harmless, and these websites know it. You can find every anti-black racist from Ben Shapiro to Charlie Kirk copying and pasting the same kind of sentiments as these mass shooters do. The only difference is instead of scaremongering about miscegenation alone, they'll say crime or culture, but it's the same spiel, and they spout it for the same reasons. Just last week I was telling you about the racism from white high schoolers towards their black classmates, that the Columbine massacre was motivated by the white supremacist ideology that Klebold and Harris had engaged in, that their little gang, the Trenchcoat Mafia, had attacked a black student and menaced his siblings, and that on the day of the massacre, Klebold and Harris specifically sought out and killed that very same black student. In most of these mass murders, we consistently find some element of white supremacist, if not outright anti-black ideology from the killers. Yet the white media conveniently neglects to mention that connection, because they're not about to do anything that indicts the dominant society. This murderer Rupnow, like Klebold and Harris before her, also ran around in pseudo-paramilitary attire. Notice that she's on a gun range wearing brown cargo pants similar to the kind that mercenary contractors wear. Klebold and Harris's little gang also wore combat boots and berets. This is meant to show a particular mindset that these little racists have, that they're at war, and given their open anti-black ideology, it's clear who they're at war with. But you'll also notice that this woman's wearing a shirt with the letters KMFDM on it. KMFDM is a multinational industrial rock band, whatever that means, from Hamburg, Germany. The KMFDM shirt that she liked to wear is also significant, because the Columbine shooters were also fans of that band, and they wore the exact same shirts too. So she was modeling herself after them. These were her role models, because under white supremacy, their religion is one that worships power, but for them, power means one thing and one thing only: the ability to kill as much as you want without consequence or remorse. Under white supremacy, the more ruthless, the more racist, the more you're revered. And this obsession with idolizing those who carry out mass murders in the name of white privilege is not just a psychotic sickness that affects those at the top, the elites who like to have tons of money stacked up and they say that these were the murders that got them their billions, but it's also practiced all the way down to children. The artwork associated with this band often features guns and scenes of violence, so of course the white media ignores it because they're not black. But people like Rupnow and other disaffected and malignant youth idolize this stuff. The so-called artwork that these kinds of bands like is disturbing to look at because it doesn't look human. It looks like a satanic machine's interpretation of what humans look like. Now to you and me, this is clearly deranged. But to a deranged mind, this is emotionally resonant with them. It's all about the feelings, and the feelings on display are anger, pain, lust, destruction, indifference to others. The images are abstract, sharp, dark, and hostile, which is how they feel. Art imitates life, which imitates art. But to the white supremacist, it's the art of war. From Columbine to this latest degenerate, we see so many of these mass murderers who are into that Nazi rock crap, and yet we've never seen anyone in white society or the white media going on some jihad to ban this stuff. But this is the same white society that has attacked and banned every single form of black music since jazz. Go back in the archives of this channel and you can find my prior videos about that. There's been bans put on things like rap music, of course, and silly Negroes trying to score brownie points with white society by attacking rappers. It's cowardly because white power, starting with the white media, will gladly give anyone attention and support if they attack black people for any reason. But not if you're going to criticize or attempt to curtail the activities of someone who's been classified as white. The white media doesn't support black people doing that. And it matters, because black people don't have any power in this society. Not surprisingly, Rupnow idolized other mass murderers like Arda Kukuk Yatim, a Turkish neo-Nazi who carried out a mass attack earlier this year. Samantha referred to Kukuk Yatim as an ultimate saint and acknowledged him as a significant inspiration. Turkey is part of the European Union, even though the Turks are largely Muslim, and that being the case, they don't really qualify as white, certainly not in the Western European sense of the term, and yet you find that so much of this white supremacist ideology is right at home there. So what does that tell you? Kind of indicates what they think of when they say European Union. But something else I noticed, other than her blatant racism, is that she repeatedly said that nothing she does is ever her fault. Quote, "I've grown to hate people in society, and it's truly not my fault though, it never was." Or, "It's not even my fault though, it's everyone else's. It has to be theirs and not mine." Now, where are the clowns from the white right at to lecture society about how people like this need to take responsibility for their actions and stop always blaming everyone else for everything that happens to them? This killer kid literally blamed the entire world. And no, she was not mentally ill. This was not an act of lunacy. It was an act of extreme entitlement. This was not someone who had lost control. This was someone who was determined to show that they were taking control of everyone else. Don't let the white media blur the lines and obliterate the difference. She's been conditioned to be this way, conditioned by family and by society. She is truly a product of her environment. And that environment is white supremacy, which is basically synonymous with these mass shootings because white supremacy is synonymous with the suburban culture that produces these psychopaths. Of course, you have to notice she's wearing a Joker shirt. See, this is where life imitates art, though I put the word art in quotes. This is why it's a bad idea for the white media to be promoting the idea and images of serial killers and psychotics as being some sort of dark geniuses. But because the dominant society produces so much of them, they kind of have to do that. The reason the white media does this, however, is because these studio executives and the reprobates in their orbit are degenerates, and they use their positions in the white media to play out all kinds of demented fantasies in real life. As a result, they want to feel validated in their degeneracy. They want to celebrate their satanic behavior, so they produce movies and TV shows where the psycho is treated like some evil genius, whose brilliance is simply too high for the rubes and the normies to understand. And we see all kinds of horrifying crimes and butchery as a result. These slasher movies and torture porn are actually wish fulfillment fantasies by these white media and studio executive types who are being gratified by seeing this mess. They look at that screen and they see themselves, and truth be told, They're right. The non-stop social worship that the dominant society receives, combined with their obsession with guns, because guns are what gave them control of the world a few hundred years back, this is a toxic brew that keeps burning them over and over again. But freedom of movement and immunity from law and criticism are the three primary tangible benefits that white supremacy bestows on those it classifies as white. So they're not about to infringe upon that. As always, this latest slaughter is going to be swept under the rug with the propaganda line of, "She was crazy," and that's because she's not black. Black shooters are always sane. They can be barking at the moon, crazy as hell, but there's never anything wrong with them. But when the shooter looks like, well, the overwhelming majority of mass shooters, none of them can be sane. They're not allowed to be. There must be something wrong with them, even though it happens so routinely that it's normal. So we see that this mass killer's denial of responsibility for her actions also directly mirrors the denial of responsibility by the white media. When she says, "It's not my fault, it's everyone else's. It has to be theirs and not mine." That's the same way the white media denies reality with all these mass killers. They're not responsible for their behavior. It has to be mental illness. It has to be the fault of mental illness and not theirs. Because if they admit that there's nothing wrong with these psycho killers, then they would also have to look and say, gee, we got a pattern here that says this is normal. But normal why? And why does the racism kick into gear after middle school with so many of these shooters? Because as Neely Fuller explained, around the time that white children become 13, that's when they hit puberty, and it's when their parents and those in their social circles begin making it very clear to them precisely what the rules of racism are, how every aspect of their lives is to be conducted based on it, and that they better adhere to that because that's what their position in life depends on. You see, that's the age when they stop tap dancing around the edges with them and just come straight up the middle with it. That's why this behavior becomes particularly virulent when they hit their teens, about the time that they're getting into the late middle school years. Will we see the white media racializing this? See anyone asking the white suburbs to explain why this keeps happening? Will we see white leaders holding marches and saying, we gotta stop killing each other? Will we see the relentless pushing of that narrative? Or will it just be treated as a nameless, largely faceless tragedy that just fell out of the sky like an asteroid? Again? Well, we've been through this enough times to know exactly how this one's going to play out. And so, as usual, the country can go ahead and hold its breath until the next slaughter takes place at a school or somewhere else. Tragically, they won't have to wait long. Unfortunately, that's normal too. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Zachariah Williams, Tamara Williams, Farrell Taylor, Tyrone Leake, and Cheryl Tate. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.